I think we're ready to proceed then. This is case CR 33-21-1298, State versus Cody Polatis. Mr. Polatis is represented by attorney Trent Grant. Mackenzie Cole represents the state. This matter was set for a jury trial. However, the court has received a plea agreement that was filed on January 7th, and I understand your client wishes to change his plea pursuant to the plea agreement today. Is that correct, Mr. Grant?
That's correct, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Polatis, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. In this case, then, there was a plea agreement filed, as I mentioned, January 7th. I will walk through the terms of that plea agreement. I'll have several questions for Mr. Grant, and then a lot of questions for you as well, Mr. Polatis, going through the plea. So the first thing I will do then is explain the plea agreement, and that indicates, Mr. Polatis, that you would be pleading guilty pursuant to this plea agreement to count one of the state's information, which charges you with indecent exposure, a felony, and that's a violation of Idaho Code 18-4116 subsection 1. I will just notify you that that felony carries a penalty of up to 10 years in prison, a fine of up to $5,000, and a sex offender registration requirement. So do you understand the possible penalties that go along with that charge, Mr. Polatis?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. The terms of the plea agreement indicate that as part of that plea, then you would be required to register as a sex offender, and that is required under Idaho Code 18-8304 subsection A, and that offense is one of the listed offenses requiring that registration. Also, you would be required to obtain a psychosexual evaluation prior to sentencing, and that would be included in the pre-sentence investigation report. The court would also be reviewing and relying on information obtained through that evaluation as part of the sentencing. So do you understand those terms of the plea agreement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. In exchange then for your plea to that charge, the state makes the following agreement: that it would limit its recommendation on sentencing to a retained jurisdiction, and that you would be free, along with Mr. Grant, your attorney, to argue for whatever sentence you believe is appropriate, including asking for probation if you think that's the appropriate sentence. And those are the sentencing recommendations. Do you have any questions about that, Mr. Polatis?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I will explain to you also then that this is what's called a non-binding plea agreement. So the court will listen to the recommendations made by the state, by your attorney, and by you. I'll also consider the information in the reports I receive, but the court is free to impose whatever sentence I think is appropriate, including up to those maximum penalties. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. This time then I'll have some questions for Mr. Grant, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Polatis. Mr. Grant, in this case, have you had enough time to discuss this matter with your client?
Yes, Judge.
And have you done everything you believe was necessary to protect his interests in this case?
I believe so.
Have you filed all motions you thought were necessary in defense of the case?
Yes.
All right. Were you able to conduct discovery in this case and receive responses from the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Did you share that information with your client?
I shared that information with him, and we have had the opportunity to discuss that discovery.
Thank you. Have you explained to Mr. Polatis all of his rights and defenses and the consequences of a guilty plea today?
Yes, I believe so.
Do you believe that your client understands the ramifications of a guilty plea?
Yes, he does.
And do you know of any reason why he would not be competent to enter a guilty plea today?
No, I do not.
All right, thank you. Then, given all those circumstances, Mr. Grant, do you consent to his entry of a plea pursuant to this plea agreement?
Based upon our discussions that we've had over the last several weeks, and based upon a review of that plea agreement, yes, I would consent to his plea.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant. This time then I'll have questions for you, Mr. Polatis. In answering these questions then, I'd be requiring your responses. You do have the right to remain silent in this case. By going forward with this hearing then, you would be waiving that right to remain silent because of those responses I'd be requiring. So Do you agree to waive your right to remain silent and go forward with this change of plea hearing, Mr. Polatis?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. If you'd please raise your right hand, then I'll have the clerk place you under oath.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you will give in the cause now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Polatis. Mr. Polatis, I know you've been in custody a while. I'm going to ask you regarding your state of mind at this time. Do you currently take any kind of medications that interfere with your ability to think clearly?
I'm on antidepressants.
Okay. And are you currently taking those right now?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you feel like those impact the way you think or cloud the way you're able to reason and going forward for a hearing like this today?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Do you feel like you're thinking clearly this morning then?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And you're not currently under the influence of any other type of substance at this time, are you?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Are you currently on probation or parole?
No.
All right, I went through the charge you would be pleading guilty to, including the penalties that go along with that charge. Do you have any questions about that?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Polatis, I also explained the terms of that plea agreement, that's a non-binding plea agreement. Do you have any questions about that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Polatis, have you had enough time to discuss the case with your attorney?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, was your attorney able to share with you information he received in conducting discovery in the case? That would be things like copies of police reports and other information the state has.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, are you fully satisfied with the representation you've received from Mr. Grant?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Polatis, then, has anyone coerced or pressured you into pleading guilty today?
No, Your Honor.
Has anyone promised you that you're going to be placed on probation if you plead guilty?
No, Your Honor.
Has anyone intimidated or threatened you or offered you any type of a reward for your plea?
No, Your Honor.
All right, is it correct for me to conclude then you're pleading guilty freely and voluntarily today?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Polatis, then do you understand before sentencing I would order a report which is called a pre-sentence investigation report?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll advise you a few things about that report. First, the information in that report will be kept confidential. Second, you're allowed to talk to Mr. Grant and consult with him in answering the questionnaire for that report. And third, the court would be relying on that information in the sentencing in this case, and you would be required to cooperate with an investigator to have that report prepared. So do you understand all of that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, at this time then, also, Mr. Polatis, I'll advise you that since you'd be pleading guilty to a sex offense, do you understand that you may have to register as a sex offender for the rest of your life?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, since you are pleading guilty to a sex offense then, I will be ordering that psychosexual evaluation that was agreed to in your plea agreement. Therefore, I need to advise you pursuant to an Idaho Supreme Court case called Estrada versus State that you do have the following rights. Number one, you have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent during the psychosexual evaluation on questions pertaining to other crimes you may have committed. Anything you say in the evaluation could be used against you at sentencing. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Also, you have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel regarding your decision as to whether you should remain silent during that psychosexual evaluation. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Finally, I'll advise you then the sentence this court would fashion in this case may be influenced by that psychosexual evaluation. So while you do have those rights, if you are not cooperative in getting that report prepared, the court could not be informed of your complete history, which may make it difficult for me to conclude whether or not you would be a low risk to reoffend. So do you have any questions about that?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Grant, were you able to discuss the implications of the psychosexual evaluation with your client?
We did discuss that some time ago, Your Honor, and I will let the court know that Cody completed a psychosexual evaluation with Dr. Hatzenbuehler in 2020 as a part of a misdemeanor probation. It's our hope that we can just update that evaluation. That may save a little bit of time between now and sentencing. I have reached out to Dr. Hatzenbuehler to see if she's available to do an update on that. I've not heard back from her yet.
Okay, that's helpful information. Thanks for letting me know that, Mr. Grant.
Your Honor, could the state be heard on that?
Yes.
Your Honor, part of the agreement is that Mr. Polatis will get a psychosexual evaluation. The state does not feel that just an update would be appropriate. I do think that a full psychosexual evaluation pursuant to the plea agreement is appropriate in this case. And so I would ask that a new one be done. I think the polygraph is going to need to obviously include this specific incident as well.
That's fine with me, Your Honor.
What's that, Mr. Grant? You're on mute.
I have no objection to that, Your Honor. I had thought, for some reason, I had in my notes that I thought we were all on the same page regarding an update, but yeah, I have no problem with starting afresh on that.
Okay, very well. We'll order a new and complete evaluation then as pursuant to the plea agreement. All right, then, Mr. Polatis, do you understand by pleading guilty on this offense today, there will not be a trial in your case because you're waiving your right to a trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, do you understand that means also you'd be giving up your right to present evidence of your innocence and present your defense at trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Do you also understand, Mr. Polatis, by pleading guilty to this felony, you would become a convicted felon, so you would lose certain rights, including the rights to vote, to serve on a jury, to hold public office, and the right to bear arms?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very well. This time then, I'm about to ask you for your plea on that charge. Before I do that, Mr. Polatis, do you have any final questions for the court or anything you think you need to discuss in confidence with your attorney?
No, Your Honor.
All right, then on the state's information and pursuant to this plea agreement as to count 1, part 1, which charges felony indecent exposure, Mr. Polatis, how do you plead?
Guilty.
All right, and I will also ask you on count 2, this indicates that you have a previous conviction, which would make this offense a felony within 5 years, and that was in 2016 on case CR 2016-4041. Do you admit that you were convicted in that case within 5 years of when this case was charged?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so back to the plea on count 1 then. The information states this happened on or about July 12th, 2021 in Madison County, Idaho, and that you did willfully and lewdly expose your genitals in a public place or a place where there were other people who were offended by that, and then it lists the initials of some minor children at the Warm Slough campground. So I'd like you to tell me in your own words what you did to be guilty of that offense. And keep in mind, Mr. Polatis, this is not a sentencing or a time for a lot of explanation, just to give facts that would indicate you were guilty of the offense. So if you can tell me what happened and whether it's correct, that was on July 12th in Madison County.
So I did willfully expose myself with the intent for somebody else to see it.
All right. And do you agree that happened July 12th, 2021 in Madison County?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And were there some minor children that in fact did see that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I'm satisfied with that allocution. Ms. Cole, is the state satisfied with the allocution?
Yes, Your Honor, that's sufficient.
All right. Then based on your plea, Mr. Polatis, the court does find that you're competent and understand the nature of this offense and consequences of your plea. I'll also find that you understand and consent to the terms of this plea agreement. There's a factual basis for the plea and it's been made knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. We'll therefore accept the guilty plea and direct the clerk to enter that into the record. We'll schedule the time for sentencing now, keeping in mind that we have to prepare a PSI and the psychosexual evaluation. So typically, Mr. Grant, we need a minimum of 8 weeks without the psychosexual. I don't know on the psychosexual if that's going to require additional time or whether we should look at about an 8-week setting on this. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Grant?
I would be comfortable with setting it at about 8 weeks. And then if I can get confirmation from Dr. Hatzenbuehler that she's available to do a new evaluation from scratch within that 8 weeks, great. If not, then Ms. Cole and I can let the court know that it may need to be delayed a few weeks further.
Okay, I'm looking at March 14th. That would be at 11 o'clock. Does that date work for the state and for the defense?
Works for the defense, Judge.
That works for the state as well, Your Honor.
And Judge, I guess before we go any further, I believe that the criminal information in this case did carry a part 2 to it, where I think Cody probably needs to acknowledge that he has been convicted of a misdemeanor offense of the same charge. I think that is necessary to make this a felony.
All right, I believe I went through that and he
You did?
admitted to having been convicted on
Okay,
the 2016 case.
I may have missed that. I apologize.
Okay, I mean, I think it was covered. Does the state have any concerns with that, how the court went through it?
No, Your Honor, I think the record is sufficient.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Grant. So that'll be the time set for sentencing then. Mr. Polatis, you need to cooperate with the pre-sentence investigator, and also that psychosexual evaluation will need to be prepared. So we'll see you back here for sentencing on March 14th. And counsel, if there's a delay in that, let us know and we'll find a time as short as we can after that for sentencing. So that will conclude the change of plea hearing today then. Anything else from the state we need to bring up today, Ms. Cole?
No, Your Honor, not from the state. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant. Anything further from the defense?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks for your appearances then. You can be excused and we'll call up our next case.